Hi everyone, we are Johnny and Roberta from Synchronicity Center for Modern Mindfulness and Awakening, and we'd like to welcome you to episode 6 of Introduction to Practical Buddhism and Mindfulness Meditation. This series is intended to give you an easy-to-understand overview of core Buddhist philosophy and provide you with simple tools to apply it to daily modern life.
So for today, we are going to continue going into detail explaining to you each of the steps of the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. And as a reminder, this is the part of the Buddha's teachings that forms his fourth Noble Truth. Now, once again, we covered the Four Noble Truths in episode 3. So if you haven't seen that one yet, I would suggest you watch it first in order to give you some background as to what we are going to continue talking about today. But essentially, as we mentioned in the last episode, following the steps of the Eightfold Path is part of the actual practice of core Buddhist philosophy, and one that with consistency and diligence can lead you on the path to awakening or enlightenment.
And as another reminder, the steps of the path are not meant to be followed in any sort of linear order. They are all meant to be practiced simultaneously, as each step helps with cultivation of the other steps. And this is the reason the steps are often represented in a wheel format, or also could be imagined as an ascending spiral, with no actual first or last step.
So, in the last episode, we introduced the path to you, beginning with the step of right view, also known as wise or skillful view or understanding. And that falls under one of the 3 divisions of the path referred to as wisdom training. So for today, we will continue with the next step in that same category, right intention, also known as wise or skillful intention.
And another reminder, please subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and if you are able to, support the work we are doing with Synchronicity Center, as we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Please consider making a small donation to our website, synchronicitycenter.org. So let's get started.
Yay! So, this step is known as right intention, or wise or skillful intention, or even in some texts, you might see it as right resolve. This is an important step of the path, as it involves the intentions behind all of the things that we say and do. And it seems an appropriate step after right view, as your intentions many times arise from your perspective and understanding of a situation, which then, as you will find, is what creates related thoughts. And those thoughts then lead to actions.
So, while practicing right view, if you have good intentions, they will help generate good thoughts, which will then, in turn, generate good actions.
It sounds pretty elementary, doesn't it? But do we always practice it?
No. So the kind of intentions, thoughts, and actions we are talking about here are all those that would be aimed at alleviating suffering for ourselves and others, leading you further along the path of enlightenment.
We can essentially, at the core, boil that down to simply reflect on your own intentions that drive your daily life and all that you say and do as you interact with others. You can take a hard look at those intentions and ask yourself, why is it that you are doing what you are doing?
If your intentions are being driven by thoughts of anger, hatred, or aversion, the actions you perform will be a result of that. And that would obviously not be an example of right or wise intention.
And likewise, if your intention behind your action is for selfish reasons or driven by greed, gaining wealth, position, or power, or that you are looking to attain something personally at the expense of another group or individual, even if it may appear that your actions are positive, for example, promising things you don't intend to deliver, or being disingenuously nice to someone so they will do something for you, then that would also not be an example of right or skillful intention either.
To explain this a bit further, let's take a deeper look into the Buddha's teachings of right intention. The Buddha talked about there being 3 specific areas of this step on the path to enlightenment. He identifies having the intention of renunciation, the intention of goodwill, and the intention of harmlessness.
He further teaches us that these three intentions are antidotes or remedies for combating greed, hatred, or aversion. Now, if you've been following the series, you may recall in our episode about the Four Noble Truths that those are 2 out of the 3 of what the Buddha referred to as the 3 poisons of greed, hatred or aversion, and delusion.
Once again, these are mental habits that are so deeply rooted in all of us that they cloud or poison the mind.
So essentially, in his analysis, these are the 3 things that are the root to all suffering, also known as dukkha in the Pali language.
So if we want to begin to eliminate dukkha, we need to formulate our intentions to overcome the poisons of greed and hatred and aversion. And please know that the first step, right view or understanding, that we already discussed in the last episode, is what combats the third poison of delusion.
But as far as intention goes, the Buddha explains that by focusing the mind on generating and cultivating positive or good thoughts derived from these intentions that are the opposite of the kind of thoughts generated by greed or hatred, it is possible to eventually replace the negative patterned ones through somewhat of a continuous thought substitution process. And this works because both contrary thoughts cannot exist together in the mind at the same time.
And that's a very interesting fact.
Yeah.
So now let's unpack what the Buddha means by each of these intentions. We'll begin with having the intention of renunciation and how this will work to combat the roots of suffering derived from greed.
The Buddha, being the rebel that he was, describes his teaching as if it runs against the way of the world, or against the stream. He explains to us that the way of the world is driven by desire.
Now what he means by this is that most all of those that operate within this world have been conditioned into a constant pursuit of their desires, continually seeking happiness and contentment in all of the things that they think or believe will quench and fulfill those perceived needs.
And it can be interestingly noted that this drive began and is also largely motivated and fueled by our innate survival instincts. For example, to desire or crave the things that make us feel good, taste good, ensure procreation and continuation of our species, or keep us warm, safe, and sheltered.
But the difference from these survival-based desires being applicable and helpful during primitive cave-dwelling times versus our modern-day society is huge.
I can say that again. In our modern-day Western society, most all of those basic survival needs are already met for most of us. So the instinctive drive and desire for those things doesn't carry the same weight and importance for us and our survival.
Yet, we are still afflicted with them and begin transposing them to what is available to our current society.
Which, in many times, is excessive overabundance of everything.
These could be material things, relationships, jobs, social status, or even something simply sweet and tasty.
And in our modern day world, this innate drive is even further highly reinforced by capitalism, commercialism, advertising, marketing, television, entertainment, social media, and even parents and friends and relatives.
The pressures of the constructs of society that everyone needs the next big thing, the newest car, the latest phone or electronics, jewelry, the most recent fashion accessories, a bigger house, or that next big promotion.
Or even things like to be skinnier, more fit, muscular, younger looking, or even to have a certain body shape with a bigger backside. And on and on and on.
Seriously, just consider, how many times have you heard someone, or maybe even yourself, say, if I could just get that new fill in the blank, then I will be happy.
But when you take a step back and truly reflect on it, does the attainment of material or physical things satisfy you?
Well, usually, but not for long. Is that new job going to make you forever happy? Not very likely. What about wealth, power, and status? Nope.
All one has to do is take a small sideways glance at the myriad of misery, dysfunction, addiction, misdeeds, and mishaps of the rich, famous, and powerful. I'm not saying for everyone, but a huge chunk of it.
If we dare to examine it, not one, not even all of these things can truly bring everlasting happiness.
Considering the impermanence of all things, it's possible that upon initial attainment of these desires, you may experience the emotions of happiness, gratification, or excitement for a short while. But then what usually happens? Once the novelty of your new possession wears off, or the wear and tear and needed maintenance of your new car, house, or boat becomes apparent and cumbersome or expensive, or the hard work and extra long hours it takes to fulfill the new position of your new promotion begins to take its toll on you or your family.
So that you can earn that extra money and buy yet more things that you think will make you happy.
After all of those things, you will find yourself just craving or desiring something else different, new or better yet again.
The Buddha identifies that the practice and intention of renunciation flows directly opposite of this conditioned continuous pursuit of desires.
He teaches that we should resist the pull of craving and desire and work to eventually abandon it altogether.
And we are not to do this because desiring things is wrong or malicious from a moral standpoint, but because as determined in the Four Noble Truths, and as we mentioned just before, desire is one of the root causes of avoidable suffering.
So essentially, pulling ourselves away from craving and its driving pursuit of gratification becomes the ticket to being peaceful, joyful, happy, and free from the bondages of attachment.
Now, even during the Buddha's time, he was certainly not suggesting that every single one of his followers give up their householder lives, join the monastery, and toss all physical sense pleasures and desires out the window, right then and there, in order to follow this path.
He recognized that the extent and method to which a person pursues this step and the path in its entirety would vary tremendously due to their individual situation, experience, and personal nature.
But he does emphasize that in order to achieve complete liberation on the path, the practitioner still must eliminate craving and break free from the bonds of desire, as it is, once again, one of the causes of suffering.
Now, this doesn't mean that it is an easy thing to do, but one way that does work is to direct our minds to the intention of renunciation.
So, to bring this into a modern-day context, relatively speaking, in relation to the Buddha's time, it doesn't mean that you have to give up everything. Leave it all behind and go meditate in a cave for the rest of your life.
But essentially, that it is still within your ability to liberate your mind and free yourself from the chains of craving. And it is possible to do this through understanding.
We need to recognize that it is not just about forcing ourselves to give up things that we continue to cherish deeply, but rather shifting our perspective regarding them so they are no longer seen as something that binds us. This allows us not to attach to their attainment as a means to fulfill happiness.
So a detailed exploration, seeing and understanding of the cycle of gratification driven by desire and its connection to suffering shifts your perception towards that of non-attachment and renunciation.
Therefore, the task begins by being mindful and aware and recognizing when you are impulsively caught by desire or craving. Rather than habitually acting on it, you can begin consciously allowing yourself to dive below the surface of your desire, looking beyond your immediate wants and drive for instant gratification, and examine the true motives of your actions.
It is at this point that you can then begin to analyze and further investigate your desire. You can do this by contemplating the long-term consequences, exploring possible outcomes, results, and the merit or worthiness of your goal from a well-thought-out vantage point, particularly one that considers the practicality of your conceived action without attaching to it as a means of instant gratification or happiness.
You may many times come to the conclusion that it may not be worth pursuing, and hence not fulfilling that desire will prevent you from getting caught by the foreseeable suffering.
Or at the very least, the analysis will allow you to make conscious and mindful decisions and actions, taking into consideration well-thought-out benefits, consequences, and any possible repercussions.
It's certainly a process that doesn't happen overnight and requires practice, but mindfully contemplating in this way allows the intention of renunciation and non-attachment to little by little displace habitually driven desires and motivations of greed.
Now let's move on to the second two intentions of goodwill and harmlessness. These combat the opposite intentions of anger and ill will derived from the poisons of hatred and aversion.
It's pretty obvious that, though it may initially feel good to act on, unleash, and release your body from the built-up tension caused by feelings of ill will derived from anger, hatred, or aversion, you don't want to let down your guard and foolishly act out on these types of thoughts, verbally or physically.
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea. Seriously, though. Your actions will surely have consequences, and you will be setting into motion a very negative karmic chain of action. And we'll be getting into that further on in our series.
Whether your actions are subtle or extreme, if driven by anger or hatred, you may ultimately end up creating enemies, destroying relationships, creating resentment, or even provoking people or organizations to retaliate against you.
Or you may even go so far as getting yourself into trouble with the law. And then you're in for a whole new kind of suffering.
And it's also important to consider that, ultimately, wildly unleashing actions driven by the intention of anger and ill will does not actually rid yourself of the root causes at all.
And likewise, using the opposite tactic of repressing these types of thoughts and emotions only serves to push them deeper into the mind, where they have the tendency to fester, transform, and convert into feelings of self-loathing and extreme self-criticism.
And these kind of mind states can lead to chronic depressive disorders, self-harm, or even suicidal ideation.
And they could even become displaced, leading to unreasonable and uncontrollable angry or violent outbursts.
One thing the Buddha prescribes to help combat ill will is through the practice of what is called loving kindness, or metta meditation. In Buddhism, metta is one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, or qualities of love, translating from the Pali language as loving kindness or loving friendliness. Now, we will be doing an entire future episode dedicated to loving kindness and metta, all of its benefits, and how to practice it step by step.
But for now, we can explain to you that it involves cultivating an extremely intense, selfless, boundless feeling of warmth and love within your heart. The practice then continues with directing those feelings first to yourself and then radiating outward, sending genuine wishes for the happiness, well-being, and safety and welfare of all living beings, including those that you have difficulties with or feel ill will towards.
We can both tell you that it works amazingly and helps to cultivate the intention of goodwill. We highly recommend making it a regular part of your practice. Once again, we will be going into much deeper detail on the practice in a future episode, so be on the lookout.
And lastly, as somewhat of a complement to metta, to foster the final intention of harmlessness as a remedy for malevolent, hostile, or violent thoughts and feelings, the Buddha teaches us to cultivate compassion, also known as karuna in Pali.
This is also another of the 4 qualities of love that we will cover in detail during our episodes on loving kindness. But essentially, as part of the practice of loving kindness, developing the characteristic of compassion allows yourself to understand, experience, and share that universal reality that all beings suffer and all beings wish to be free from it.
You then incorporate that understanding and compassion into your meditations and contemplations to help cultivate the intention of harmlessness, thereby combating harmful thoughts derived from the poisons of anger or hatred and aversion.
So, just to recap and review, up to this point, we have learned about right view or understanding, what that entails, and how it fosters right intention. We should now understand how they work together as an antidote to the 3 poisons of greed, anger, hatred or aversion, and delusion, which are root causes of our avoidable suffering in life.
We should also now have a pretty good grasp on how to practice right intention.
In upcoming classes, we will also show you how right view and right intention leads to the next area of training on the path of ethical conduct or morality. This area encompasses the steps of right action, right speech, and right livelihood.
So otherwise, that about wraps it up for the step of right intention and the first division of the Eightfold Path, wisdom training. And as we just mentioned, we will be going deeper into explaining the actual practices and other rationales involved with loving kindness or metta practice, as well as cultivating the 4 Brahma Viharas or qualities of love in a future episode.
And on that note, for our next episode, before moving on to the next 2 training areas on the path and the remaining 6 steps, we will dedicate some time to introducing you to meditation practice. We feel like it's a good time to do that, so that you can begin to experientially put into practice the concepts that we've been teaching you over the last several episodes.
Now, meditation practice is essential to seeing the true nature of your mind and the true nature of reality. It is essential to the path and essential for you to achieve any form of awakening or enlightenment.
And as always, we hope you learned something new, or even a slightly different perspective to something you had already known. Feel free to post any questions and comments, and we will try to answer those questions in a subsequent episode. Also, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and check out our website, synchronicitycenter.org, and sign up for our newsletter to keep up to the date with all the things we are up to.
And while you're there, if it is at all within your means, please feel free to contribute a small tax-deductible donation. You can even sign up to be a small monthly donor if you'd like. And you can do this via our PayPal or even our Facebook donate buttons, as it will truly help for us to produce more content like this in the future and support all of the other work that we are doing. But for today, we will leave you with our own wishes for loving kindness or metta.
May you all be happy. May you all be well. May you all be safe and free from suffering this day and every day. Thank you.